Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blaise XPerience once again. You are joining us for episode 79, and I'm your host, Derreck, as always, and today we're here to talk about more State of Decay 2. Today we're going to talk about patch 8.0 that just released on Tuesday, so you're hearing this on a Saturday, that's been out for a few days now. We did talk about some of the things in this patch last episode. We talked about the World War II weapons, so we're not going to cover that again today, just because we've already talked a lot about that. And there are some things that are features that were talked about last episode that we will mention briefly again in this episode, but we won't spend a lot of time on them. But the other things that weren't mentioned last episode are going to be spent a little bit more time with today. But before we get into that, I just want to mention that our next podcast next Saturday is either going to be on the Dead by Daylight Killers and New Endgame, or it's going to be on the Sea of Thieves update. It really depends on whether I get enough time to play the Sea of Thieves update or not, and basically both of those will be covered at some point, but I just want to make sure I get enough time with the Sea of Thieves update to actually talk about it. So you'll find out next Saturday which one of those we're going to talk about. And then I want to mention that our next stream is going to be Sunday, 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be playing some more State of Decay 2. And thanks to a donation to charity by Fall Down Go Boom, we are going to be doing CQC only and explosives. So that should be a lot of fun. And I said, anyone that donates next 5 minutes or something like that, and he donated, and that's what we're going to do now. So that whole stream, anyone that plays with me will be doing CQC and explosives only, so that's going to be a lot of fun. But now we can kind of get into the episode. So I do have a guest here with me today. You have heard him on the podcast a few times now. Please welcome back to the podcast, Undead Labs senior designer, Geoffrey Card. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, thanks for being back. I appreciate you being back, and I'm excited to get these patch notes with you.
Well, it's one of my responsibilities here is writing patch notes, and so getting to read them on the air is actually kind of a special treat for me. So I appreciate you having me here.
Well, thank you. I thought the last one went pretty well, and I'm glad to have you back for this one. So. But like I said, we're going to skip over the World War II weapons, but I'm definitely excited to actually, go find all those weapons. And I don't know if you have a favorite one that you want to find, but my favorite is probably the Gangland Strad.
Yeah, I like the Gangland Strad too, because I like to pretend it's a violin, because that's what it's named after, the Stradivarius violin. But one thing I want to say about the World War II weapons, I made a mistake on the stream that we did about the patch notes. I was telling everyone, I said this on Twitter and on Facebook too, and I'm so embarrassed. I told everyone that when you're generating a new character, you can watch for certain traits, and those traits will cause World War II weapons to appear in that character's inventory. I improvised that and realized later that, of course, we override the inventories of new characters, and they don't get to keep the weapons that they would get from their traits. And so if you meet an NPC out in the environment, and they have one of those traits, they'll probably start with a World War II weapon. But the people that you're using the character generator to create right at the very beginning of the game,
makes sense.
They won't get it. So I apologize for that miscommunication. I'm glad that that you've got this platform here where I can say that out loud.
That is very true. So thank you for letting us know that. And so basically, anyone that's in an enclave, though, they might still have it if you find someone in an enclave that you can recruit. Yeah,
but it's a lot harder to sort of just randomize those as much as you want until you get what you want. So,
well, maybe we'll find one in an enclave. We'll get lucky that way. So,
yeah, good luck.
But we'll kind of get to the patch here. Like I said, some of the features were covered last time, so we'll spend a little bit less time on those. But we're going to start out with demoting leaders, which this is a really awesome feature that I'm really glad we have now. It's some of the community's been wanting for a long time, and I don't know how hard it was for you guys to develop, but I'm definitely glad it's here.
Yeah, this is one that a lot of the time, we get a lot of requests for features, and a lot of the time, when we're interacting with players of the game, particularly on our Discord, we'll hear a lot of the same things again and again, and I think people might be a little bit nervous sometimes, to recommend something or ask for something that's been asked for 100 times before. But honestly, it's the fact that something's been asked for 100 times that makes us want to put it at the top of our list. And so demoting leaders was one of those. We were hearing it constantly, that this was a big pain point for people, that when they wanted to change their mind about their leadership, for whatever reason, it required them to destroy one of their valuable characters. And so now that's not necessary. And honestly, this was always part of the plan. We had to cut it for time before the game came out. But we came back and we were able to do it. So, I'm happy to see it, in the game working the way it was always meant to.
Absolutely. I'm really glad to try it out. And, I love the fact that too, when you demote your leader, they actually go down in standing, because it would actually happen that way in real life. They're not going to be too happy about being voted. So
yeah, no, it's, some of us have had that experience in real life, and it is difficult on your morale.
Definitely. But like I said, we're not going to spend a ton of time on that because I covered it last time. But moving on, some character changes. We have a community quest. Non-player characters are now a lot less aggressive towards nearby enemies while talking to you. They will still defend themselves if attacked, but they won't break out a conversation to chase a zombie that is across the building from them. I just want to say personally, this is one of my favorite changes in this patch, and it's really awesome because it was so frustrating to always, try to talk to somebody, especially if it's a trader. Like, I go to trade with a trader, I'm like, okay, I want to get this gun, I want to get this. Oh no, they're fighting a zombie. Okay, I want to get this. Oh no, they're running away again.
Yeah, so this was one where we weren't actually hearing a lot of that. We heard this one a few times from the community, but this was one that, I think one of the reasons it got prioritized was because it was such a pain point for us whenever we were testing missions and things like that. We were running into it all the time. We're like, we've got to be able to do something about this. So,
yeah, the most frustrating part too is, like you said on stream. I mean, especially if you're talking to Enclave, they have like two other guys that are right next to the zombie, but the one character you're talking to has to run to the zombie too. It's like, well, they can't handle the one zombie.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm definitely glad that's in there now.
Yeah, me too. Makes my job easier.
Definitely. And another one that I talked about last time, but we'll just mention briefly again. I know Fall Down Go Boom actually had an issue with this, where when you switch characters in Outpost, your old character now teleports home rather than heading out on foot and probably dying, because I heard that Fall Down had in one of his streams, he was in a nightmare zone, he switched characters in an Outpost, his character tried to walk home and walked right into a horde and died.
Yeah, so. We had a few stories like that, Fall Down and from other people, where we realized there's several updates that we've made on this, I think, where, this was always an issue, but no one cared because the game was easy enough that they wouldn't suffer the bad consequences. And so other stuff bubbled to the surface. But as soon as Nightmare Mode came out, suddenly there were some issues that people were tolerating without complaint for a really long time that suddenly were really, really important. And this was one of them.
Absolutely. So I'm glad it's fixed now, because after hearing what happened, I was kind of scared to switch to an Outpost. So I basically only switch characters at home. So I'm too scared to switch to an Outpost now. So
Well, glad we can make that a little bit better for you.
Exactly. And another community request, when you switch characters with your flashlight on, your new character starts out with their flashlight already on. That's something I mentioned last time too. But.
Yeah, and that's kind of parallel to the change we made last update, where we made it so that when you got in and out of a car, your character wouldn't forget if their flashlight was on. It's interesting how once we make a change in one place, it suddenly makes it obvious that there are other places where that change should be made.
Yeah, but now it's uniform throughout both cars and switching characters, so it works out both ways. So.
Yeah, designers like it when things are elegant and when they
exactly.
match.
But the next change we have, abandoned followers no longer teleport directly over your head like drop bears.
Yeah, so there was just this thing where, whenever a follower gets too far behind you, they can't navigate for whatever reason, we eventually try to teleport them to bring them up to you again. But for some reason, I wasn't directly involved with this bug. For some reason, they were appearing at the wrong elevation and just landing on you. And that was weird. So that doesn't happen anymore, hopefully.
Yeah, I heard you describe that in the stream, and I didn't hear of it before, but it's kind of weird to hear about, where they appear way above you. It's like, what? But next we fixed a bug that was preventing characters from getting nicknames based on their last name. This fix unlocks a huge list of nicknames that weren't available before. So I mentioned this last time, but basically you said in the stream that it unlocks where long last names became shorter names now.
Yeah, so this was one of my personal favorites, just because the name system is kind of my baby. And so we designed this whole system where the idea was that a character would assemble, when you're generating a character, we assemble a list of possible nicknames for that character. And those possible nicknames come from their first name, they come from their last name, and they come from their traits. And then and each of them has its own weight, and then we make a random roll and decide which nickname that character gets. But there was something, and we had characters, who had traits like that put them in the military or the police, or that just said this character goes by their last name. And they would use their last name as a nickname. And so we're like, okay, we've got all these different ways that characters can get nicknames, and it works really great. And the thing, because it's so random though, we were, hitting, generate character, generated character, looking at the characters, we're like, yep, they're getting a nice variety of nicknames. This is really cool. We thought it worked. The problem is we didn't notice that they were never getting nicknames based on their last name. They would sometimes get their last name itself as a nickname, but they would not get nicknames based on their last name. And we literally didn't notice it for months and months and months. And so I wrote all of these nicknames that were never getting used until one point, I can't remember exactly what I was doing. I think I might have been working on secret stuff, and noticed that a character that I desperately needed them to have a nickname based on their last name, they were never getting it. And I was like, what is going on? And it turned out it had always been broken. And a character had never, ever had a nickname based on their last name. And so names like, one of the examples I'd always give was like Sully being a nickname for Sullivan. That wasn't happening.
That's the classic one, so.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a place where this was really important, where, if a character has a really, really long last name, or a last name that just doesn't fit into a sentence very well, the way that it's, like for instance, if your last name was De La Sosa, and the D in De La Sosa is lowercase because de and la are just, small words leading up to your real surname. That doesn't fit very well in a sentence. And some very long last names, especially from certain other cultures that where people tend to have very long surnames, they weren't even fitting in the UI. And so having these characters go by their last names instead of a nickname based on their last name was causing a lot of problems, for certain characters. And so now that this system is fixed and it's in and working the way it's supposed to, characters with very long last names or last names that present grammatical problems, they now use nicknames based on their last name. So De La Sosa might just go by Sosa, and and somebody with a long name, could use a shortened version of it, which is like like Ekanayake could go by Eka, which is actually a friend of mine. So like he's kind of, people like him that I know several people in my life who have that, who do exactly that. They go by a shortened version of their last name in their day-to-day life. And so we wanted to represent that in the game, and the fact that it wasn't there, was sad, and so now it's back. And I'm talking a lot about it because it's my favorite feature. So anyway.
That's okay. No, I remember on the Undead Labs stream too, you had a character, named Catherine, and she went by Ren, so.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah. And then we had in the most recent stream, we had a character whose last name was Webb, and he went by Spider, because that's the kind of ridiculous dad joke that people will make, out of their nicknames. So. Come
to think of it, I actually found a character in my game called Spider too, so that might be, why.
There also could be multiple sources of the name Spider. Like if there could be like, if somebody's like a cat burglar or something, they could also be named Spider. I'm not sure.
Well, I did find a spider, so I'm glad I have a spider in my game now.
Oh, I'm glad that we've got that in there.
But next we have some facility changes, and this one actually wasn't mentioned before the patch notes came out, and I was kind of surprised that we didn't hear about this one, because this is kind of a big deal to me, is the sort ammo action at the store facility. It now has been rebalanced to make some of the rarer ammo types more common. So basically the 3.57 rounds, you'll get about twice as many. The 44 and the 7.62 rounds, about 50% more, about 15% more of the 5.56. And 25% more of the 9mm, and
25% fewer of the 9mm.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Because basically, anytime you sorted ammo, if you sorted ammo a million times, you would get this enormous pile of 9mm rounds and just a handful of 357. And so we haven't rebalanced it completely. It's not like they're all equal, but you'll notice we only had to take 9mm down by 25% in order to massively beef up the percentages of all the others, because that's how dominant 9mm was. And so now it should be a little bit more balanced. If you tend to go out with a 357, you're not going to be completely out of ammo to the degree that you were before.
Yeah, to me this is really awesome change too, because if you don't have all the ammo presses, which a lot of experienced players might have all the ammo presses already, but if you don't have all the ammo presses, then it's really hard to find some of those types of ammo in the world too. So it's actually nice that you can get it more through sorting your facility.
Yeah, the rarity at that facility is actually pretty similar to their rarity out in the world. The distribution is about the same. So, we fixed it in the facility to make it a little bit easier.
Yeah, so I'm definitely glad it's there. I do have all the ammo presses, but I mean, if I didn't, then I would really appreciate this even more so.
Yeah, and if you want to start a vanilla game, you'll have the advantage.
Exactly. But another change is upgrading an infirmary or clinic no longer ejects its blood plague patients, which was causing their death timers to quietly resume. Survivors now remain checked in after upgrades.
Yeah, so that one was, again, it was not a big deal before we introduced Choose Your Own Apocalypse and the new, high difficulty zones, because blood plague just wasn't much of a threat. People would take hours and hours to die, and people were not even checking in their blood plague patients except during the tutorial, because there was no point. I mean, they were going to last forever. You could go get Plague Cure was, thick on the ground, and so you could just cure them, and no one ever used that feature. Now that somebody could die in a few minutes from the blood plague, you have to check them in if you don't have any cure. And if they get accidentally bumped out of the infirmary, they could just die, and you don't even know about it. And so that was happening to people. And so we were like, oh, crap, we've got to... this is another one of those things where it wasn't a problem. I mean, it was a problem. It was, an uncomfortable, weird, kind of bugged feeling part of the game. but it wasn't causing people to lose significant stuff until after the update. And so once that came out, we're like, oh, well, we definitely need to fix this one now.
Yeah, because in Nightmare, that timer's at 10 minutes. I mean, that's a pretty quick timer.
Yeah, that's kind of ridiculous.
So I'm definitely glad that's there now. You're checking your survivors. I mean, in standard mode, honestly, I haven't really heard of anyone really checking their survivors in standard mode because you never really had to. So.
Yeah, there's kind of not a reason to. So.
But another one, the Scrum certification skill now grants a speed bonus to the building facilities in addition to its original speed bonus of other facility actions.
Yeah, when we were originally developing the game, before it ever came out, more of our facility actions actually took significant amounts of time. We ended up speeding up a lot of the facilities. And so the Scrum certification skill and other bonuses like it would speed up the actions of those facilities, and it was really valuable. But it kind of got less valuable after we reduced a lot of the facility action times. But the one thing that stayed the same, that we didn't reduce was the build times. Cause that's a really significant investment, building a new facility. And it would feel wrong if they just popped into existence, right? And so it was weird that the Scrum certification skill was not granting a speed bonus to the one place where you actually really want one. So we went back in and fixed that.
Especially in Nightmare now with the build times increase, like that's really important to have.
That is, that's another one that sort of rose to the surface because of the new difficulty levels.
Yeah, because I remember doing the Builder Legacy in Nightmare mode, and wow, that took a long time because you had to build so many things, so.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But it was fun, though.
And your threat's high that entire time.
Exactly, so it was interesting. But we have a couple other things that I don't know if are related to that, but they're listed under here. Windows with multiple panes now break as you would expect, rather than quietly violating the laws of physics. Yeah,
so maybe this one actually kind of goes under other stuff. I think some of the choices we made with what goes under which category in this list might be a little bit questionable. But yeah, so Windows basically out in the world when you're running into buildings, you can shoot through windows and break them. There were a few windows though that had lots and lots of panes, with sort of a wooden frame in between them. And if you shot them in the right order, you could make really weird things happen. And so, we had some folks, spend some time figuring out what was going wrong and making it so that the windows break more naturally now.
Awesome. Yeah, I didn't really have a lot of problems with those. I think I've only had one or two times ever in my time playing State of Decay I've ever had a problem with Windows, so not too often, but
yeah,
it works.
It wasn't causing any gameplay affecting problems.
Right.
It was an aesthetic thing, but it's better now.
And we fixed the bug that was causing the game to begin without the characters of where the world fully spawned in.
I'm sure you remember this one. For a long time,
yes.
Whenever you started the game up, you were a floating backpack, and then slowly you became a person.
Yep.
That doesn't happen anymore. That was a pretty high priority one. Like, once I started noticing that, I was like, come on, guys. We gotta, this is first impressions here. We gotta do a little bit better than that. And, I have no idea what it was that caused it to start going that way, because it wasn't that way when we first shipped the game. Something crept in that made it start happening.
Yeah, I literally had that happen to me last week, so.
Yeah. So I'm glad we've got it fixed. It's one of those, stuff like that happens all the time, kind of like the audio bug back in the day. It's like,
right.
You're doing perfectly normal fixes to the game, and for some reason, something causes something really obvious to the player to go wrong, and you've got no idea where it came from, but eventually you've got to fix it, because you can't put that stuff out in front of people.
Well, part of that bug too that was also made it funny is you would, until you actually spawned in, you kind of slide around on your feet, you wouldn't even be walking, just be on a sliding track basically.
Yeah, well, yeah, your backpack wouldn't bounce like it was being animated because there's no character. Right.
Yeah. So it's kind of weird.
Yeah.
But we fixed the crash that occurred when a character was killed after being exiled.
That's another one that I think popped up mostly after Nightmare, because when you'd exile a character and they'd run away from your base and run to the nearest exit, they wouldn't get killed before, but now they will, and it turns out that crashes the game. So yeah, fixed now.
Awesome. But now we have a new section that is items, and this next one is actually pretty important, I think. This is a community request. Quick repair toolkits have been rebranded advanced toolkits, and they now repair twice as much damage as standard toolkits. Their crafting cost and rarity are unchanged. They're just better now.
Yeah, so this was a request that came from a specific person who contacted me on Discord, and I've forgotten who it was. So if they're listening to the podcast, I'm sorry I forgot who you were. But somebody contacted me and was like, hey, you know what? I never, ever make quick repair toolkits, because all they do is cost more and speed up repairs. But I'm never doing repairs when I'm in the middle of a tense, situation where, zombies could get me any second. I always wait until I'm safe. And so it doesn't have any value. I'll never make this item. And I was like, you know what? that makes a lot of sense. And I think we might have even checked our analytics to see how often people were using quick repair toolkits, and it was not very often. And so we're like, okay, this is
that
not...
was the same reason for me. I mean, that was the reason I wasn't using it. It's like, well, I don't really need a quick repair toolkit. I mean, it does the same thing as the regular one, so.
Yeah, so what's the point, right? If you just got, 3 more seconds of your life to spend on it, the other one's just as good. So we changed it. So now they do twice as much healing. Originally I was going to go for 1.5 or something, but when I was testing it out, I was like, you don't feel the difference until it's twice. Cause, cars are complicated. There's lots of different parts of them that could be damaged. Telling the difference between one amount of healing and another amount of healing when you don't have a health bar to look at, it's just hard to tell. And so it needed to be really dramatic to make a difference. So we went with twice.
Yeah, and that is why I tried to have you guys show it on stream, but unfortunately you couldn't cheat it in.
Yeah, sorry about that. We could have cheated it in one of the previous streams we did because we were using a dev build. But this time we were actually playing the real retail build of the game, and so we couldn't cheat.
Yeah, so I'll have to find it in my own set. I'll have to find one then.
Cool.
But, another community request. This one was actually mentioned in the last podcast as well, but deployable pyro minefields now spawn with the correct rocket pods. They set zombies on fire again.
Yeah, so that was just people were starting to tell us that they were getting into Daybreak, and the deployable pyro minefields were not setting the zombies on fire. And for some reason they were just not using the right projectiles, and so now they are.
Yeah, so that's great. I haven't used any pyro minefields in the base game yet, actually, but honestly, it's partially because I don't want to get my character set on fire, and sometimes it can go wrong. So,
yeah,
that's just personal preference.
You got to care about your characters a little bit more in the base game.
Exactly. But another community request: in response to players finding certain crossbows overpowered against plague hearth, we reduce crossbow damage across the board, though headshots against zombies are still always deadly. Yeah,
so most uses of crossbows are going to be exactly the same. Like most of the time, you're just going around spearing zombies in the head with bolts. That is unchanged. It's just when you're trying to pepper a plague heart or a juggernaut or other human characters that they were a little bit overpowered and we wanted to bring them down.
Yeah, no, I definitely like that. I mean, I've found that a little bit too. I think Fall Down tracked it at 10 bolts, took down a plague heart for one of the crossbows at one point. So
yeah, which is that just doesn't seem like it kind of undermines the realism of the game when you're it takes this much C4 to destroy it, but this many crossbow bolts, it just felt like it was completely out of proportion. So,
yeah, it was kind of like back in the day when the 50 cals took out a heart in 3 hits. So,
yeah, exactly.
But crossbow bolt impacts no longer play inappropriate audio.
Yeah, I wasn't directly involved in that one, so I'm not sure what noise they were making that was wrong, but they're making the right one now.
Yeah, I'm glad. I mean, I didn't really notice it either, but I'm not a big crossbow guy, so I don't know what sound it should sound like. So,
there are a lot of bugs that have happened in the game where no one noticed it except the audio team, but to the audio team, it was like nails on a chalkboard hearing the wrong sound coming out of something. So,
which that makes sense. So,
I'm glad that they're perfectionists because it's a subtle thing. Like you don't always know how sound in a game is affecting you, but if it's wrong, you're feeling wrong, and you might not always know why. And so we've got a crack audio team that's paying attention to this stuff, making sure we're getting it right.
Yeah, I'm sure that old audio bug must have drove them nuts when that was going on.
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, that was it was clearly not their work. It was clearly a technical problem that was just canceling their work. But yeah, it drove all of us crazy.
I can imagine. Characters with appropriate traits now have a chance of initially spawning with a crossbow. This includes the new crossbow hunter traits.
Yeah, so we added a crossbow hunter trait, and we found other traits that seemed like the character who had that trait might spawn with a crossbow. And we gave him crossbows. Though again, you will if you are hitting the regenerate character button again and again and again, and you find the crossbow hunter trait, that character will probably not spawn with a crossbow right now. But if you find non-player characters out in the world, sometimes they'll have a crossbow on their back, and we thought that would be interesting.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. And come to think of it, I mean, I could be misremembering some situations, but I don't actually remember seeing any NPCs with crossbows before. So
yeah, so I think there were a couple in the very specific missions that were added with the Zed Hunter expansion. That added
because
the crossbows.
You had to get off their body. Yeah,
they were the only ones.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah. I was gonna say, cause, I don't remember ever seeing Enclave with this guy has a crossbow. That's cool.
Yep, that hasn't happened. So hopefully it'll be happening. It'll still be rare. There weren't that many traits on our list that seemed appropriate, but you will see it occasionally.
Awesome. I'm glad that trait is there now. Unbreakable items no longer drop from plague hearts in a damaged condition.
Yeah, so basically, a lot of weapons that you get from plague hearts will start out damaged. You got to take them home and repair them. We didn't want it to be too OP, but we were accidentally also applying that to bolt action rifles and revolvers that in our game are unbreakable. So that didn't make any sense, and so now that doesn't happen anymore.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, because I mean, say you got one of the revolvers that's not supposed to break, then that shouldn't be damaged. So
yeah, exactly. I'm not even sure whether or not they were repairable after they were damaged, because I wasn't directly involved with that bug, but I'm glad we got it fixed.
Absolutely. And now we move on to the user experience, and there's a couple of great changes at the top here that I think are really important. One is a community request. You can now hold Y on a controller or R on a keyboard to unload the ammunition from a magazine and a weapon in your inventory, so you can store it anywhere else. And honestly, this is like my favorite change of this update, because all the weapons that I wasn't using, they would just sit there with ammo in them. Now I can unload all that ammo and have a ton of extra ammo in my community.
Yeah, this this was kind of thought of in the same breath as the change to the ammo distribution, to the sort ammo action, because like somebody who wants to use a 357 revolver, for instance, that not only can they not get very much ammo through the sort ammo command, but if they have three 357 revolvers, and they're out of bullets with one of them, they can't get the bullets out of the other one, and it's just really frustrating if you're dealing with a rare ammo type, not to have access to ammo that's definitely in your supply locker. Drives people crazy. And people were also talking about how when they sold a weapon, they wanted to get the ammo out first so that they could still keep track of that keep that valuable resource while getting rid of something they didn't want. And so the idea that they had to sell the bullets or use the bullets before getting rid of the gun just felt just obviously unnecessary in the real world. And so now the game's just a little bit closer to reality.
Exactly. You don't want to give those traders free ammo. I mean, they don't need free ammo.
Yeah, exactly. They got plenty.
Exactly. So keep it for yourself. But I'm definitely glad that's there now. So thank you for that.
Yeah. The next one is one of my favorites. This has been like a pet peeve of mine forever. The one where now if you're transferring items from a vehicle inventory to your base, you can do it from any slot in your inventory and not just the vehicle slots. Because, seriously.
Yeah, that's really, really cool.
Since day one of release, it's been driving me nuts that every time I brought my car home and parked it in a parking spot, first I had to send all the stuff in the vehicle home. Then I had to load stuff from my backpack into the vehicle. And if it's a small vehicle, I might have to do this multiple times. Load stuff into the vehicle, then send it. Then load it into the vehicle, then send it. And if I was trying to keep, a repair kit or a gas can in the vehicle, I kept accidentally transferring it the wrong direction, and it was just a nightmare. And so that is finally fixed. Now just, if you're at the trunk of a vehicle and you're at a parking spot, every space in your inventory can send things into your base.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've done that myself. I wanted to keep the gas can in there. I accidentally transferred the base. I'm like, dang it. Now I have to go get that again. So I'm glad you can do that now.
Yeah, me too.
And that's honestly a change that I wouldn't have really thought of, because I just was kind of used to the clunky motions of okay, I got to put it here, put it there. I was just already used to the clunky motions, but now that it's there, it's wow, this is amazing.
Yeah, hopefully people will forget about all of the pain and horror of doing it the old way, and the new way will just become the only thing that they think about.
Exactly. And that's honestly why I tend to end up liking a lot of these user experience changes, because they just make life easier without really having to think about it. So. But this is one that you said was a issue on PC, where when playing with the mouse, you can now click the empty leader slot in the community screen to initiate leader selection, rather than having to press the spacebar.
Yeah, so we had a goal early on in State of Decay 2 where we wanted to make sure that every part of our interface was equally playable with a controller or with a mouse and keyboard. And we were very serious about it, but eventually, when push comes to shove and you're trying to get stuff done by a deadline, sometimes, lofty goals like that kind of fall by the wayside. And when we got to the point where we were implementing the community screen, we were under a lot of pressure. And so we just implemented it for controller first and figured we would solve it for, mouse and keyboard later. But it turned out to be kind of an uncomfortable decision because that screen definitely feels very controller centric. And so it was one of the later things we did before release, was changing that screen so that it could support mouse and keyboard. And you could click around on the characters and it would feel more natural because for a long time you could only use WASD to navigate between the characters and spacebar to select them.
Right.
But when we went through that process, there was one thing that we forgot. It was just an oversight. We forgot to make the leader slot, the empty leader slot, clickable. And so everything else actually worked with the mouse and kind of was a lot more reasonable than it was when we first started developing it. But that one thing was left, and so that was like a pet peeve that was just sticking to me. Like, how come I can't click on this? And so we finally found sort of the right occasion and the right time and resources to fix that one, and I am so much happier with that screen now that everything is clickable.
Yeah, I don't play on PC, so it's kind of funny for me to hear about. But like, I mean, all my friends that are on PC, no one ever mentioned this. So like, I'm kind of thinking like, if I was on PC, that'd be kind of annoying a little bit. But.
Well, see, each game, typically, most people don't go through a lot of leaders, especially because it used to be you had to kill them in order to demote them. And so it's something that would happen to you once per game, and so it would be annoying, but it's not the first thing that you would complain about. But those little tiny annoyances, like, they add up over time, and it makes the game sort of, the whole experience kind of feel just a little less good, if you're just constantly tripping over little tiny things. And so, I'm hoping that, we want to keep adding big things to the game, like, new packs of weapons, new features, stuff like that. But we also want to be cleaning up these little tiny things, because I think that has a subtle effect on your experience that you don't always think consciously about, but it does make a difference to how you feel, the kind of experience you feel like you're having.
Absolutely. And that'll be great for people that had that issue. So I'm glad for them. I wasn't having the issue personally on the console, but I'm glad that they have the issue fixed.
I mostly played on Xbox too, but like it was my knowledge that somebody else was dealing with it.
Right, exactly. But another community request, we fixed a bug that was preventing freaks from appearing on the minimap in Daybreak, and I actually experienced this myself, and that's good that that's fixed now, because especially ferals, you'd be looking, where's the feral? Where's the feral? Like, you couldn't see it.
Yeah, you used to be able to tell. People did ask us, did you guys make Daybreak harder? It feels like Daybreak is harder. And we didn't change anything about the mechanics of the game, but I think the fact that you didn't know where freaks were was making the game harder, and in kind of a subtle way. So hopefully that's back to normal.
Absolutely. And map icons for optional mission objectives have been recolored to stand out more against the background?
Yeah, so it used to be, I had a lot of, when I was testing missions and things like that, I used to have a lot of trouble. If a mission had multiple optional objectives instead of one solid objective, sometimes I would have trouble finding them on the map. It's just, I'd be looking all over the place, feel like I'd looked everywhere, and eventually I would see it. I'd be like, oh, it's just right there? But the icons were just really hard to see. And so now, instead of being gray, the icons have some color to them, which does make them pop more from the background, and it makes it a lot easier to find those objectives.
And is that similar to like the orange arrow that is shown when you demote a leader now? Or is that different?
No, we haven't added waypoints to the in-world display.
Okay.
It's mostly just it's just on the map and on the mini-map. Cause the map has got either a gray or a very desaturated kind of pink background, and both of those, a gray icon just does not stand out very well against those backgrounds. But an orange icon does stand out. And so basically we took those gray icons and made them more orange so that they'd be easier to see.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm glad that's there. Another one is entering a site while in a vehicle no longer prevents room clearing pips from appearing on the minimap. I honestly don't know what that means. But.
Yeah. So it was hard to figure out how to phrase that one because it's got a lot of complicated moving pieces in it. But basically, when you're clearing a building and there's a little black pip representing each room on the minimap, right. So you need to go, how come this building isn't cleared yet? You look on the minimap, you see, there's a black square over there. I need to go where that black square is, and then I'll clear out the room. Those usually appear when you walk into a site. But if you were driving into a site, like if you had a kind of an open air site, like a campground, or some of the sites, like the volume that decides where the site is just a little bit bigger than the house. If you would drive up and crash your car into that, you would get into the site while you're still in the vehicle. And we don't show those room clearing pips when you're in a vehicle. So you would get out of your vehicle and start exploring the site, and those black squares, those pips, would never appear. And so you would not know, like if you had mostly cleared the site, but there was one room you hadn't gone into, you wouldn't have a square to tell you where to go. And people would be frustrated. And it actually, for a long time, we didn't know what was causing it. And so figuring out that, of course, it's when you drive a vehicle in, that's what's causing it. And so we were able to...
That makes sense, yeah. Yeah, I never really tried that in vehicles a whole lot, but, it's good that it's fixed if you did, because there's not too many places in the game, I would say, that you can actually drive a vehicle to try and clear them, so. Most
of the site volumes are pretty tight to the buildings. There was an earlier version of the game where we actually would represent, like, the entire yard around a building as being part of the site, but it ended up being confusing, because people really think of, when they look out at the world, they think of each building as being kind of its own thing, and us trying to make it more complicated than that was actually just unintuitive, and so we ended up changing it and shrinking them down. So most of the site volumes cling pretty tight to the walls, and it's hard to get inside them while you're in a vehicle.
Yeah, because I was trying to think through my head, too, like any bases that you could actually get in with a vehicle, and I couldn't really think of any in my head, so.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that Mon Prince Cyclope could get one in, but most of us can't.
Like, I know Knight's Family Drive, and you can get into, where the cars are parked, but that's not one of the clearing.
That's not the actual base, yeah.
Exactly, so. Another one is if you interrupt a subtitle by conversing with an NPC and then exit the conversation while the original line is still playing, the subtitle comes back too.
Yeah, so it's just pretty straightforward. You're talking to somebody, there's a subtitle on the screen, or somebody's talking to you, I should say, and the subtitle's on the screen, and then you walk up to somebody else and you start a conversation with them. And when you start a conversation with someone, it makes all the subtitles go away because the conversation's happening over in the dialogue interface. And so if you interrupted, like say, Lily's on the radio talking to you, and then you go and start a conversation with someone else, Lily's subtitle goes away, and you're like, oh man, I wanted to read that. And so you back out, but the subtitle's already gone. It's been killed. So now that doesn't happen. Now if you back out of that dialogue, if there was a subtitle that should still be on the screen, it'll come back.
Yeah, that's really good for actually, listening to the stories and finding out the stories too, because you don't want to get rid of some of those stories sometimes.
Yeah, well, some of those dialogue lines, they'll really only play once for you. And so, if you don't want to miss it, we want to make sure you get the chance.
Right. But that is it for that section of changes. We now have some multiplayer changes, and next one is actually fairly important to me too, because it's incoming clients now land in the host vehicle if the host happens to be driving at the time, and I think this is really good actually, because there was a lot of times where I'd already be playing a game, I'd be driving to a location, and then a friend's like, hey, I want to jump in your game. They jump in the game, but they spawn at some outpost that's along the road or something like that, and then I keep driving, they keep getting tethered, so.
Yeah, so we, in the previous update, we added the ability, like when you get tethered and the host is driving a car, then you would just land in the host's car. And we realized that we could actually make this happen for when you first spawn in as well, which is kind of like being tethered. And so,
right.
So now it works the same way in both cases.
Yeah, because before the previous update, you just keep getting tethered over and over again, basically. So it was even worse. But now you get landing vehicles. That's awesome. And this next one, I highlighted because someone in my community, Maximilian Colby, he asked me specifically about this one. I'm like, I have absolutely no idea what this means. So I told him that I would bring it up on the podcast.
Yeah, and I don't have a definitive answer about it either, unfortunately, but I can tell you what I think.
All right, so I'll read what it is. Bonuses to influence games now apply to multiplayer wars in addition to stand-in-game earnings.
So there's a handful of traits and I think some skills that give you an influence bonus. And what that means is every time your community earns influence for something, you earn a little bit more. Like if it's a plus 50% bonus, then each time you would earn 10 influence, you get 15 influence. And that applied across the board. And I think there might actually be a couple examples of places where someone gets less influence. So if they get, negative 25% influence, and each time you get, 20 influence, you actually get 15. And so there's positive bonuses, there's negative penalties, but they were being applied to almost every influence gain in the game, except for multiplayer rewards. And so now they apply to multiplayer rewards. And it's my assumption that both the positives and the negatives are going to apply to multiplayer rewards, because that's how it would happen if we just implemented it in the simplest possible way. I honestly have no idea, though, because this particular bug, I wasn't personally involved with it. I don't know if they had the penalties reduce your influence when you receive multiplayer rewards, or if they clamped it so that it could only go up and not down. So I don't know for sure. That was a question that your friend had, and I honestly don't know for certain. I assume that the penalties apply, though, because that's the simplest solution. And honestly, I think the penalties are fairly rare, and not everyone on the team even knows they exist, and so I would not be surprised if the penalties apply.
Okay, so you're saying things like, say, the fifth skill, people skills, where it gives you plus 10% influence gained, then that is where it's supposed to be applying, probably?
Yeah, exactly. So if you get, so if you end up getting, 20 influence, then you actually get 22 influence, because of that extra 10%.
Okay. That makes sense then. Yeah, because I didn't even have a guess what that was. Like, I have no even guess what this means, but I'm glad you have a guess at least.
There's so many skill and trait effects in the game that are actually just kind of invisible. It's like, if you read them, you're like, oh, I guess that's happening, but there's nothing that's really telling you that it's happening in the middle of the game, so it's easy not to know about them.
Right. Well, thank you for clearing that up a little bit, so appreciate that. But non-player characters no longer fall through the world or spawn in the sky when exiting vehicles.
So this one is in the wrong category. It should be up in the character section. But so there was this problem where if you got in a car and you had a follower get in the car with you, say you're up on a hill and you get in the car together, then you drive down the hill, the follower gets out of the car, and then they're like, oh, where should I be standing? And they still remember their altitude from back when they first got in the car. And so they would suddenly teleport way above the car and then fall out of the sky. And similarly, they could, if you drove up a hill, they could end up spawning in the middle of, under the ground. and sort of fall to their death into the invisible void beneath the surface of the earth in our game. And so now that doesn't happen anymore. Now they actually find the altitude that they should be standing at right there where they've gotten out of the car.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense now because I was having issues with some of my friends in multiplayer where we'd like be in the ground all of a sudden. I'm like, how are we in the ground? And I think it was always when we got out of the car. So we must have been up high and then we got out of the car. We're in the ground now.
I could see that. I could see that being the case.
So we're like, how am I in the ground? Like, what's going on? But it's glad that it's fixed now. Now we're not taking naps on the ground anymore. So getting tethered with the map open no longer tracks you on a black screen.
Yeah, this was a rare one, but if somebody happened to have the map open at the very moment that they got tethered, it would basically be sort of a lock of the game. Like they would be on a black screen and they couldn't get out of it. So now that doesn't happen anymore.
Awesome. Yeah, I don't think I've had that one happen to me, but I'm glad it's fixed. So
yeah, me too. I'm glad that it never happened to you. Unfortunately, even if something only happens to 1 in a million people, that means it's going to happen to 5 people, and so we still have to fix it.
No, absolutely. Because I mean, when these patch notes come out, like every time, like, oh yep, that one happened to me. That one, oh, not that one though. So it's always like,
but it happened to somebody,
happened.
right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Statistically, it happened to somebody.
So I feel for the people that did happen to. But we fixed the bug that clients can now interact with built-in facilities after the host settles a new base.
Yeah, so there was a bug where if you're playing with somebody's game and they switched bases, you couldn't interact with certain facilities in the new base. And so now, if you were the client. So now that's fixed.
Awesome. Yeah, because I thought that was fixed in a previous patch, but I guess it's only when you settle new bases?
I think so. That's the impression I got. This one I wasn't personally involved with, so I don't know the details, but yeah.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I thought I remembered a Furious Facts that was patch that was fixed, but I guess the settling the new base part is where it comes in.
Maybe so, and it also, I could imagine like there being 2 levels of this that needed to be fixed, and also it's not entirely out of the question for us to accidentally reoffend with a specific bug and cause it to happen again after we fix it. I think these are 2 different fixes, though.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad it's fixed now. And this next one, I'm actually surprised that someone even thought of this. I guess I shouldn't be, but players can no longer throw bloater gas grenades at other players and then disconnect, causing damage from the grenade to suddenly kick in. Explosives of all kinds now disappear when the character that triggered them goes away. So I'm kind of surprised people actually even thought about that, but I'm glad it's fixed in the case.
Oh, yeah, no, I can't believe it either. It's one of the, people are when people want to grief, they can get very, very, very clever about it. And because the thing about this one is, they're not even around to see the bad thing happen because they had to disconnect to make it happen. So, yeah.
And then you're just sitting there like, what? What happened? No.
So now if somebody disconnects and they threw a grenade, the grenade just goes away and it never explodes.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I never would have thought of that, so I'm glad no one can do that to me now. So.
Yeah.
But the next section is Dreaded Nightmare Zones. A community request was made for hostile humans in nightmare zones are now a bit less deadly with firearms. This is what I mentioned in the previous episode a little bit, but basically you have a little bit more health when you get headshot now.
Yeah, so we didn't want to make the game feel easier because the whole point of a nightmare zone is that it's supposed to feel really hard. And so we had a lot of players coming back to us saying that, there's hard and then there's frustrating. And in particular, getting a headshot against you in a nightmare zone, it wasn't just hard, it felt like you had no agency at all. It felt like, well, I'm just going to die, and there's nothing that I can do about it. And those situations, they're not like fun hard, they're just annoying hard. And so we wanted to make sure that Nightmare Zones, while they're very, very difficult, they should be fun difficult. And so we just, so this is only a very, very slight nerf, but basically, when you get headshotted, you end up with just a little bit more health to survive with. And you're kind of protected from headshots for the next short time afterwards, so that you can't just get double tapped by an enemy. Because if you just get double tapped, that's it. There was no action you could possibly have taken to get out of that. And so no double taps against player characters, give you a little bit of breathing room so you have a chance to escape. And then if you get killed, then your thought shouldn't be, oh, well, this game is just, it's just cheating. Instead of thinking that, you should be thinking, oh man, I should have run away faster. I should have done something about it. Like, you should be thinking, what can I do to avoid this? What can I do next time? And you should feel like that's a compelling argument. You should feel like there's a way that you could get better at the game to prevent that in the future. And if you just feel like, no, this was just crap, the game just betrayed me, that's not a good feeling, and that doesn't make you want to come back and keep playing the game.
No, absolutely. And during the Undead Labs stream, I remember you called out during the stream that Brian was in chat, and I like the way he put it, that basically you're trying to take the WTF moment away and make that a little bit more manageable.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's a good way to put it. So
yeah.
I kind of like that change. This next one, I'm kind of glad is in there, especially after I already have the achievement. So, the true grit achievement is no longer triggered when simply by rolling over to day 100 while in a Dread or Nightmare zone. Even if most of these days were spent in the standard zone, now you must spend all 100 days in a more challenging zone.
Yeah, so if a player has already switched zones, like say they, got to day 90 in the standard zone and then they switched to Dread zone or a Nightmare zone and then got patch 8, they're still fine. They're still going to get their achievement on day 100 because we couldn't kind of retroactively go back and figure out when you change zones. But now, if you're still in a standard zone and you switch zones, we start counting our days for this achievement when you enter that zone. And so now you have to actually spend the full 100 days there.
Yeah, I'm glad I already have this achievement. I kind of got it like the cheap way a little bit, but I will say that I'm deeply considering basically taking my long-term main community and legacying that, and then restarting my main community in Nightmare and doing a full 100 days of that community. So
wow.
I might do that, actually.
That sounds challenging.
The only thing that's prevented me a little bit is I don't really want to lose all my stuff. Like, I have a collection of all the facility mods and stuff, so I'm like, oh man, I don't really want to recollect all those facility mods again, but I might do it, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because some of those facility mods took a while to get.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, you've got a lot of stuff stacked up.
Yeah, that countertop oven, I don't know how many of those you've seen, but the countertop oven is so difficult to find. But the next change, difficulty description no longer continue to display unnecessary warning text after you change difficulty.
Yeah, this is just a minor little UI problem where we put some red warning text on a higher difficulty zone when you're about to select it, so just so you know what you're getting into. But that was sticking around even after you'd switched when it was kind of no longer necessary. So now it goes away.
Awesome. Yeah, that's not really something I encountered too much, but I'm glad it's the fix. So
yeah, it's a minor thing. It doesn't really affect gameplay. It's just more of a visual thing.
And then we fixed a crash that would occur if you managed to switch difficulties when your last survivor was dying.
Yeah, of course somebody did this, right? They maybe they'd been picked up by a juggernaut who was biting their throat out, and so they quickly switched difficulties to get away. And and then we crashed the game because the game was not expecting that to happen. So now it doesn't crash. I'm pretty sure you can't get out of getting killed by a juggernaut that way, though.
I mean, I have to get them props for trying at least, though. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's like, no, switch to standard. Switch to standard. I mean, props for the ingenuity at least. So.
Yep. And I think that's it, because I think we accidentally grabbed the other stuff section earlier on in the podcast.
Yes, that's what happened, yeah. Sorry about that.
Oh, yeah, no problem. That was the point where I was like, oh, I think these are in the wrong category. But I was worried that I'd put them in the wrong category, but I think it's just a copy and paste error.
That was my fault, yeah.
Yeah, no big deal.
I basically had it in there twice. So we already went through the other stuff. So that was with the windows and the fixing the bug that was causing the characters. So we already talked about that. So we have officially covered the patch. So
cool. Well, hey, thank you for having me on here. This is great. I've got a bunch of new, secret stuff I can't talk about that I got to go work on because we are getting close to some deadlines. But I'm so glad that you had me on here. I love talking about this stuff. I love talking about the updates that we're making to the game, and it's fun to be working in a studio that really cares about supporting its games after release, because it means that it used to be that when you put a game out, any mistake that you made before the game came out, it was just there forever, immortalized in stone. And now, when people give us feedback, we can actually respond to it and make the game better for them. So it's a fun experience to be a part of. And I'm glad that, you give me this forum where I can kind of highlight one of my favorite parts of working at Undead Labs.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Like you said at the beginning, it gave you a chance to talk about the World War II guns that you wanted to say. So
yeah, exactly.
so I appreciate you being on as well, and I'm looking forward to all the secret stuff you're working on, especially Trumbull. I'm looking forward to that too. So
the lips are sealed.
But I can't wait till it's out, whenever it's out. So
same here.
But thank you for being on with me. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do so? Discord, maybe, or
so you can join the Undead Labs Discord, which I think is actually searchable now if you look for Undead Labs on Discord. I'm also at Rangatang on Twitter, so you can chat with me there. I'm Undead Geoffrey on our Discord, so either of those places are a good place to get in contact with me. I'm trying to be more and more active on those channels.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, and if you have to run, then you can run. I'll finish the outro by myself, but thank you for being here. All right, so that was Geoffrey Card, everyone. So I'm glad he was able to join us today. But just real quick to reiterate, our next podcast is going to be next Saturday on the Dead by Daylight Killers or the Sea of Thieves update. It's basically going to depend on whether I have enough time to get into the Sea of Thieves update. The Sea of Thieves update is pretty big, so I want to make sure I can actually cover it in depth with all of you. So with that update, I want to make sure that I've actually played enough to have a good grasp and good understanding of it. So if you don't hear the Sea of Thieves update in the next podcast, it's because I haven't played enough of it yet to get a good feel for everything. So it's either going to be the Dead by Daylight Killers and new endgame in that, or the Sea of Thieves update. The next stream we're going to do is Sunday, 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern. We're going to do a State of Decay 2 stream with CQC and explosives only. And this is courtesy of a donation by Fall Down Go Boom. So I was raising money for the charity Autism Speaks during a stream on Tuesday, and I said that if anyone donated $5, then I would do a CQC only and explosive stream on Sunday for the full stream. And Fall Down came through and donated, so we're going to do a CQC only and explosive stream, and anyone that's entered my game with me has to do the same thing. So no one in my game will be allowed to fire any type of gun at all. So that should be interesting, and we're going to, try and get towards legacy my main community just in case I want to do that, because I think I might actually want to do that, kind of like I said in this episode already. And I will mention the rest of our schedule as well. Next Monday from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern, we're going to play some more We Happy Few. We played it last Monday, and we're going to finish the story of Arthur and see where that takes us. I was really interested in that storyline. That game has a really cool story, and I was enjoying that story, and I want to finish Arthur's story. We're definitely not going to finish the entire game, but we'll at least finish Arthur's storyline. And basically, this is our Blind Play AMA Revisited number 1. So what that means is we do our Blind Play games where we select a game randomly from Game Pass, and we play that game. And this is the first game that we're actually replaying from that series. So we took a vote as community, and the community did vote, and the winner of the vote was We Happy Few. So out of the games that were eligible, like we had Recore eligible, Battle Block Gator, there's a couple other games we played. So out of the games that were eligible, the one that won the vote was We Happy Few. So that game is going to be replayed next Monday. And I will say that during this stream, we will decide one new Game Pass game to try later this month. What we were doing is every Monday was a Blind Play AMA for Game Pass, where we do a Game Pass game every Monday. That is actually going to change in May. Now, every month, basically, we're going to have 1 week where we do the Revisited, where we revisit one game that we've already played, and we're going to have 1 week where we do a game that is brand new from Game Pass. So basically, 2 of the weeks, we're actually going to play something else now. So that's the slight change that we're making starting in May. So essentially, on Mondays now, 2 of the weeks, we're going to have a Game Pass game, and then 2 of the other weeks, we're going to have a different game. Probably going to be Borderlands or something as we get ready for the Borderlands release. But we will give that schedule when it is announced every week. And then Tuesday, I want to say that this is to be announced still. Tuesday, it's going to be 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern. It's either going to be Sea of Thieves, playing the new update. It's going to be State of Decay 2, going for a second pass of State of Decay 2 that week. Or it's going to be Borderlands 1. Right now, I'm leaning towards playing some more Borderlands 1 on Tuesday, but stay tuned in my Discord for news on that. So just stay tuned, and I will give you the news in my Discord about what game we're going to play that day. But right now, like I said, it's Borderlands 1 is what I'm leaning towards for that Tuesday. But that being said, I appreciate everyone listening, and if you want to get in touch with me, then you can do so via email at blaisexperience@gmail.com. You can do so via Discord, that will be in the show notes. You can do so via Twitter or my Xbox gamer tag, which are both the same thing. It's at Blaise XPerience, capital BLAISE, capital XPERIENCE. You can also find me on YouTube or Facebook with Blaise XPerience Facebook page or Blaise XPerience YouTube. Those I don't check too often, though, so if you do contact me on those, then I will get back to you, just it won't be as quickly. What I get back to people fastest on is Twitter or Discord. Twitter and Discord is what I check the most. So basically, those are the 2 fastest ways to get a hold of me off stream and off podcast. And I do want to mention, too, if you're enjoying this content, if you're enjoying the content I do in the streams, I do have a Patreon now. And I want to say that we did officially get a new member on Patreon. Thank you to MFN Juggernaut for donating. MFN Juggernaut became a $15 patron. So thank you so much, MFN Juggernaut. I really appreciate that. And it really means a lot that you actually donated. And that is our top tier right now. So he is a top tier patron along with Maximilian Colby. So thank you very much for becoming a patron. I really appreciate that. And it really means a lot that you decided to do that. Basically what that is, if anyone isn't aware, Patreon is a way to support content creators for the content they're making. And we have levels from $1 all the way to $15 per month. And at these levels, you get different rewards. So at the $1 level, you get a couple of rewards. And then basically at the $15 level, which Juggernaut donated to, you would get a lot more rewards. So there's different rewards like special Discord channels that only you're allowed to access. You get more say in what games are streamed. You get top priority to play with me on stream. So it's kind of like being a sub almost for, regular like Mixer or Twitch sub. It's sort of like being a sub, just a different way to donate, basically. But I really appreciate everyone for checking out the Patreon. If you want to check out Patreon, it's patreon.com/Blaise XPerience. So that's patreon.com/BLAISE That's PATREON. So patreon.com/Blaise XPerience if you want to check that out. And I definitely appreciate that. And any patron, even at the $1 level, you will get a shout out on the podcast. So if you want to join at the $1 level, then that's one of the perks you get is you get a shout out on the podcast. So definitely appreciate anyone who does that. But if you want to find the podcast, you're obviously listening to it right now. But if you want to find other ways, it is also on Spotify. It's on Stitcher. It's on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Podbean, Blueberry, Radio Public, and many of the directories. So definitely check out those places. And honestly, if you just Google the Blaise XPerience, you're going to find it somewhere in Google. So you can find it pretty much in any directory. The only one we're not in is iHeartRadio. But hopefully one day I'll be in iHeartRadio as well. And if you don't like apps for some reason, that's perfectly fine. I have another option for you. If you join my Discord, then in my Discord, there's a special channel that is direct download links, which has a link to every episode ever made. So basically, you can directly download the episodes from that channel, and you wouldn't have to use an app. So if you're someone that doesn't like having extra apps on your phone or having extra apps on your computer, you can just literally go in that channel, find any episode you want, and just click the link. It'll directly download that episode. That way you don't have to have the whole app on your phone or something like that just for one episode if you wanted. So that is another option for you as well. But thank you everyone for listening. I really appreciate that. And thank you again, Geoffrey, for being here. I know he's not here anymore, but I appreciate him being here as well. So thank you everyone, and I really appreciate it. Thank you for listening to The Blaise XPerience.